And the agenda I put up in the chat there, we've got a great agenda for today. Why don't we go ahead and get started, and we'll catch up as we go forward. First of all, I want to recognize a couple of ELPCO board members that are in attendance. We've got Jonathan Falk, at-large member for ELPCO, Rebecca Hoover, and Will Hoover, representing the Gilmer Park neighborhood. Will Hoff, right? Sorry, got that wrong. Got to put both your names on there, guys. Help me out a bit. Christina Robb, representing the West of East neighborhood, and Judy Short, who's our land use advisor, also works a lot with the Sugar House Community Council. We're joined by our council member for Salt Lake City Council, Darren Mano. Darren, great to see you. You got a slot in the agenda just coming up. And I should say vice chair of the Salt Lake City Council. So congratulations on that. I'm sure they give you, some extra stuff, I hope, maybe. Maybe just more responsibility.
Just more meetings.
Got it. All right. Well, that's a good thing. But great to have you here and look forward to having you give a presentation a little bit. We got more folks joining. Michael Olosi, who's also another at-large member. And looks like we're filling up. So let's go ahead and keep going. And Megan, if you wouldn't mind just sending me that PowerPoint, I'll try to get that when we're going, and we'll have a little time to do it. So anybody from the Salt Lake City Fire Department here? You raise your hand or let me know. Sometimes they got to go put out fires, and so they can't make it, which is understandable. And normally we would then go directly to the next part of our agenda, which is Salt Lake City Police Department. But I have some good and bad news, and that is that Detective Nathan Meinzer got promoted to sergeant. And so he is no longer going to be the community liaison for District 4 and 5. I mean, it's good because, he did such a bang up job and really helped us and other community councils out. So it's great to have him here and see him advance through the ranks. He said he's going to train the person who comes and replaces him. So we hopefully we'll get that same, great communication and feedback that we got from Detective Meinzer, I should say Sergeant Meinzer. So he was going to try to make it tonight, but he got sergeant duties and things like that. And we'll be unable to have him. But what we do have is we have the crime report. So let me go to that, because one of the great things that Detective Meinzer has done is he gets us a special cut of data from Salt Lake City Police CompStat that's specifically for ELPCO. And let me go and grab that. Got so many things here today. There we go. Open that up. I'm just going to share this and we can walk through it. Normally he walks through it, but I can give it a shot right now. Let me try that again. There we go. All right, can everybody see that right there? Thumbs up. You can see it? Great. So basically what Detective Meinzer does is he does a special cut of data specifically for ELPCO. Normally we would be looking at something like District 5, which encompasses a much bigger area. And he's able to actually just draw the lines on the map and just encompass our neighborhood here. And we're now in a new year. And so I've started over a new analysis of what's going on with the data. And so you can see January 2022, and you can compare that to January 2021. And these are the top 15 reported offenses. And as usual, car prowls are number one, traffic accidents, sort of burglaries, some property crimes in yards and things like that. And it's interesting to kind of look at, we're actually much lower in January 2022 than we were a year ago, quite remarkably lower on some of these as well. So there's actually it looks like there's some good trends. And then you can see for the last 3 months as well, that would be September, October, November, December of 2021, just the past 3 months. You can see we're also somewhat lower and somewhat higher depending on which one you're looking at. But certainly from a year-to-year perspective, this January was a little bit better in some different areas. So that's pretty good. And as you can see, a lot of what we encounter here are traffic accidents and small property thefts, mostly from yards, cars, garages, things like that. This is pretty consistent. Well, of course, that's one reason why we watch these trends, is to see if anything changes, if anything kind of pops up. The next chart actually looks at reported offenses for, actually, let me make it a little easier to read, in terms of the top 5. And you can sort of just see it in a little bit different. This is ranked by January 2022. You can see we had 6 motor vehicle car prowls. We had, I think, 5 accidents and so forth. And you can, again, visually see how we're doing this month or last month compared to prior months. And so a little bit better, a little bit worse, depending on what you're looking at. Certainly, there's been many fewer car prowls. I'm not sure what the reason for that is. Detective Meinzer sometimes can explain what's going on, like they caught someone who was doing a lot of them and things like that. Sometimes it's the weather that affects crime, but certainly if we're doing, maybe it's also just getting the news out about not leaving your car with stuff in the front seat and the doors unlocked. That's helping there. And you can see also that some traffic hit and run accidents, those are kind of scary. Those are actually a little bit high this month as well. And then we can kind of take a look at where things are over the past 12 months. This is a little bit of a confusing graph, but on the far right side in the yellow is where we are in January 2022. And you can kind of see how things fluctuate from month to month in terms of these, most common reported crimes that we have. And certainly car prowls seem to be on a big downward trend. If you notice that top green line coming down from 14 and 15 in January, February of last year, to getting to being about half that right now at 7 and 6 in the past 2 months. So hopefully there's some good news going on with that. Those are certainly pretty annoying and definitely kind of scary. You feel like your privacy and your stuff has been invaded when you notice that someone's gone through your car. Are there any questions about the crime report? Are there any things that you guys would like us to do a little bit different in terms of how we evaluate this data, things that you want to see a little bit more of, or anything that you're curious about? Go ahead and put it in the chat or raise your hand. Is there anything? Well, keep doing it. So I think especially as you do it for longer and longer, you get more data, you get more insight on it. So, and we appreciate that Salt Lake City Police Department creates this special cut of data for our particular community council, because it really helps us zero in on what's going on in our neighborhood. Well, no questions for me, and maybe we'll get Detective Meinzer or his replacement coming in a little bit later in the meeting. He said he would try to stop by. Let's shift over to Council Member Darren Mano from Salt Lake City Council. Darren, thanks for being here. And it's been a couple months. We'd love to know what's going on at the council, what's keeping you guys busy, and what lies ahead. So thanks.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be here. I'm Darren Mano from City Council. So I represent District 5, which I think everyone on this call probably knows, but goes basically from your neighborhood all the way over to the freeway. And we are currently, the thing that is keeping us the busiest is keeping on top of the legislative session and some of the bills that are being run. The two major things this year have been a large inland port bill and now a large homelessness bill. And so both of them are so big that there are some good things in the bill and some bad things in the bill from a city perspective. And so neither of them are, I would, in my own characterization, I wouldn't say either of them are wholly good or wholly bad. The inland port bill is pretty much done. And so that one, the big changes, we got tax increment back, which is something we've been asking for a long time, meaning as the inland port develops, it was going to be 75% of the new taxes, the new growth there, would all go to the state. And it's now 65%, and that will continue to go down over the years. So we will end up getting a lot more. And that's important because as it grows out there, we're going to have to provide water, sewer, sanitation, police, and fire responses to that area. And it would have been almost impossible without that increase in tax. But the bad part about that is that we've lost our board seats. We previously had 2 board seats on the Utah Inland Port Authority board. They're going from, I think, an 11-person board down to 5. And it's all supposedly subject matter experts, not elected officials or city appointees. So that's the bad news on the inland port bill. The homelessness bill is still very much a moving target right now, but it's looking at the one thing that we're excited about is that it'll increase funding. There's been some mitigation funding that cities have gotten, although Salt Lake City historically has not gotten very much of that. It's been, I think, Midvale and South Salt Lake, the other 2 cities in the valley that have homeless resource centers in them. We're getting some money from the state to help with public safety and some of the spillover things that the city has to deal with when there's homeless resources in the city, and we haven't been getting that. So it will that bill will help us in terms of getting. It's looking like we'll get about 2.7 million a year to basically help keep our neighborhood safe. Yeah, thanks, Jason. It's HB 440. Some of the other things that are proposed in the bill right now could be things like taking away the ability for cities to say no to homeless resource centers. So right now, we're one of the only cities that has a zone that allows homeless resource centers. And you probably know this was recently in front of the Planning Commission to remove that use from our land use tables. And that'll be something that we're discussing here soon as the city council. And so that's something I have gotten some feedback from some community councils, especially Ballpark's very interested in that, but would love, and from Salt Lake Community Network, we received some feedback, but would love everyone else's thoughts on that. I could go into more details if there are questions, but I'll move on for now. But those are some of the discussions that we've been having in regard to the legislative session. Basically, as soon as the legislative session is done, we are going to move into our budget discussions. The mayor will be delivering, I think we get about a month of a break before the mayor delivers her budget to us. And then we'll be deliberating on that budget until June. But this Tuesday, the first step of the budget process, I consider this the first step of the budget process, will happen, which is the mayor is going to be reporting on her recommendations for the CDBG dollars. These are federal dollars that come through the city that we can allocate to nonprofits, and it's always very competitive. A lot of nonprofits apply for these dollars, but it's a point of a lot of public interest, and so we often get a lot of feedback from people saying, please support this one, or this one was not recommended for funding, but please add funding for that or move funding around. So that is, the mayor will deliver us her recommendations on Tuesday, and we're going to have the first opportunity for public comment. But because it'll be so fresh, we will not have seen it for very long, and the public won't have had time to see it for very long. I think the applicants, the nonprofits that actually applied for the funding, will have known whether they were recommended or not for a little bit longer, because I think they will get a little bit of an early notice. But we're going to have a second public hearing for that as well. But so that's always a big thing that we sort of review every year is, and it's a hard thing to do because there's not enough money to go around, and the need is huge, of course. But that'll be happening. The big thing that is happening right now is redistricting for the city council districts. We had a lot of applicants for our redistricting commission, and they, I think today, met for the first time, and they will be delivering us maps, which we will consider for adoption for our new city council boundaries. District 5 is going to change, and we need to grow. So we did experience growth from the 2010 to the 2020 census, but our growth was slower than the average for the city. So, which has surprised me. I think there are some questions about the accuracy of the census data this year, given that it was the pandemic and everything else that was going on politically and socially at the time. But at any rate, the numbers are what they are, and we have to balance the districts accordingly. And so District 5 will grow, District 2 will grow the most, and District 4, not surprisingly, is going to shrink. And the rest of the districts are more or less stable. There will be a little bit of growth or receding of their boundaries in some of the other districts, but the most changes will be 4, 5, and 2. So they will be meeting over the next month or so. I think we have to adopt those in May, I believe, is when we're supposed to, sometime in the next, we have a couple months before we're supposed to adopt them. So, but that's an important thing, and their meetings will be public and they will be accepting public comments. So if you're interested, please pay attention and sort of give them your feedback. And then of course it will come before the council and you can give us your feedback directly. But I'm hoping that we don't do what the state did and just make our own maps and not take the advice of this commission that we've asked to help us. So really, to kind of give that feedback, the time would be now, because I hope that we'll just take the map that they deliver. They may give us 2 or 3 options and we'll choose which one of those, but I would hope that we don't have council members, and I don't plan to try and sort of get too involved in changing the maps, because that's why we've asked these people to help. We recently received a briefing on the libraries, the Salt Lake Public Library System's master facilities plan, which is basically their plan for what library facilities need to be fixed, need to be upgraded, where we need new services, and you know, like what the sort of capital projects for the next the foreseeable future are. And one of those would be in District 5. District 5 is the only district that doesn't have any library in our boundaries. And so the mayor has indicated that it's her desire that goes in the Ballpark neighborhood near the station somewhere, in conjunction with another thing that we're expecting to get soon, which is the Ballpark station area plan. That is essentially will become a master plan for the development of the Ballpark neighborhood. That's still going through the process of being reviewed by the Planning Commission. They need to give us a recommendation, and then the city council will eventually officially adopt that as a city master plan. So that's one, those are some things. Let's see, there are a couple other things on our upcoming agenda. Let me just scroll through it real quick. We're hopefully at the end of this really long ordinance we've been trying to pass, which is to get you, the residents, better public notice when the city or utility companies do work in the public way. Because I think we all have experienced Google Fiber and the Verizon cell towers, and how sometimes we're very surprised that works will start happening. So we're trying to get that over the finish line. There's been a surprisingly large amount of technical things that have needed to be ironed out, but that should hopefully be close to the finish line now. We've been working on it for over a year, so it's about time. A few rezones, none in District 5. We will have a briefing on our work session. We have it scheduled this Tuesday for a presentation from Sweet Streets, which is kind of a local advocacy group that has just started. And they are going to be making the case for us to change our default speed limit to 20 miles per hour. I think you've probably seen those 20 is plenty signs. I have one in my own yard. I'm supportive of this and I'm excited. So this is one of the things that I've tried. As vice chair, I said, let's give them some time on our agenda. And my hope is that we will, my plan is to hear from the Sweet Streets Board, their proposal, and then I'm planning to kind of straw poll, like an unofficial request of the council to see if who else is interested in reducing the speed limit to 20 miles per hour. This is a safety of our children issue. The likelihood of fatality for an auto pedestrian accident, the curve starts to become inflected at 20 miles per hour. So it's pretty low likelihood that you'll die if you get hit by a car until it gets to 20 miles per hour, and then it just shoots up from there. So that's really is sort of the data shows that that's the speed limit that is safer. Of course, we know speed limits aren't the only thing that determine how fast people drive, and we have other work to do with our street calming and our street redesigns to get our streets safer. But that's something I've been excited about and supportive of. If you also are interested, this before Tuesday would be a good time to just send an email to council comments, which will go to all city council members, so that all council members have that kind of fresh in your inbox before Tuesday, when I try and make that unofficial sort of poll of my colleagues to see if we can get some direct staff to start working on that. But that's something I'm hopeful to do this year. I think I'll leave it at that. I've probably taken up more time than I was allocated, and open it up for any questions you might have.
Any questions for Councilmember Mano? I could start off with one, and that is, Darren, will the council also be redrawing the school board districts in addition to the city council districts?
That's an excellent question, and the answer is no. And it's an interesting reason why. Typically, we would. Under state law, the city council will redistrict any school boards that are completely located within our city. But if you remember a few years ago, there was an annexation into Mill Creek for a little bit of property over near Brickyard. That annexation only affected the municipal boundary and not the school board, the school district boundary. So there are like 3 streets of houses that are in Salt Lake City School District that are in Mill Creek City. And so because of that, the county council redistricted their the school board districts. And we had actually identified that early on and asked the school board if they would be interested in like conceding that same territory to Granite School District so that we could still redistrict their boundaries, and they said they were not interested in that. So so because of those few streets that now lie in Mill Creek City, we do not do the school board boundaries this year. And I think the county council already finished. So I think their process is done, and I think they've already done the school boards as well. Someone can probably fact check that, but I'm pretty sure they're done.
Any questions for Councilmember Mano?
I'll post my contact information and my Facebook page in the chat. I do a review after every council meeting. I just do a quick Facebook Live and tell you what we got done that day, and try and give a little bit of insight when it's appropriate about what my thoughts are on a few things, or what the discussions we had are that maybe a little bit more color than you'll find in the official council recaps, but sometimes not much. So, but I'll leave that in there.
We did get a question on the chat, Darren, and that is from Robert Goodman. He knows that Sweet Streets is going to be advocating for that priority bus lane on 200 South. What is your insider position on that?
So I know that Sweet Streets, they talked to me about that as well. I don't know that they've made a lot of progress in advocating for that, and that's something that was already kind of already been funded and is a little bit further down the line than what the council can control. So it seemed like, I think they talked to someone in either transportation or the mayor's office, and my understanding, and this was just like kind of unofficial from Sweet Streets, I met with them on Friday to talk about Tuesday, or sorry, last Friday, I think. And so my understanding is that they don't feel like they've made a lot of progress for that. I'm all about things that support active and public transit over single passenger vehicles, but it sounds like my insider information on that is that I don't know that it's gotten far. So I'm not sure if that project is too far down the line to change, or what the progress is. So I don't actually know too much about that one, other than that they didn't seem too encouraged when I talked to them last week. So.
Got it, thank you. Any other questions? Thanks, Elizabeth, for putting in the Sweet Streets link there. We'll look forward to that discussion at the council meeting. And boy, I don't know if anybody on Sweet Streets has toddlers, but I got to keep my daughter away from knowing about that name. Otherwise, she's going to be licking the pavement everywhere, thinking it's candy. That's the mindset she's in now. But also, Darren, thanks for telling us about the library proposal as well. It's interesting when you think that District 5 doesn't actually have a library. Yeah, that's something that would be great to to fix and have it on the Ballpark neighborhood be a great location. Central Ninth, that whole place, that'd be great. So cool. All right. Well, thanks for sticking around. And also I'll put up the link to the council or District 5 newsletter, which Darren helps put out, which is a great resource for what's going on at the city council. But next up, we're shifting from City Hall to 9th and 9th to a very interesting presentation that came across social media, and people emailed it to me and said, hey, you got to take a look at this, from a student at the University of Utah who's joining us, Anders Hart. And so Anders, thanks for being here. And I'm hoping that you could give us a description of what you came up with for 9th and 9th. It's a place that we all know well. And it'd be great to see your fresh take on where you think this iconic kind of pocket neighborhood and business district could go. So please take it away, share your screen. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here with everyone. I'll go ahead and share my screen. I just have a presentation here. I think everyone can see that. So yeah, like Jason said, I'm a student at the University of Utah in the Master of City and Metropolitan Planning program. And so I'm really interested in transportation and land use and planning in all its forms. And so this presentation is part of a project I completed last semester for an urban design class. I have a personal connection to the neighborhood. I grew up just a few houses down from the Cafe Espresso on the corner of 11th East and 9th South. So I know the area very well and spent a lot of time there. So this assignment was challenging, but it was a lot of fun because we were asked to choose a place that we were familiar with and then build on its strengths to create kind of a vision for the future. And this was, we were encouraged to be very bold and think big. So, we weren't asked to consider the specifics of the feasibility, like the zoning and the financial aspects. It's more of kind of a conceptual exercise, but I think it was really good opportunity to just think through what a place could be and to build on what it already has. And this kind of was envisioned to build on what the city is already doing on 9th South, because I know they're in the process of reconstructing it. And this kind of, in my mind, was just a bit bolder vision of what is already happening there that could be added on. So I did limit myself just to the core of 9th and 9th, which we all know, from Windsor to Lincoln, and then just right along 9th South there, just to keep it a little more manageable. But obviously there are other businesses, especially as you go farther up 9th South, and Smith's is right there. But this in blue is just the area that I decided to focus on. And then I'm not going to go into depth in this, but I did just kind of do what's called a place analysis that looked at different aspects of 9th to 9th: access, context, time, identity, and sociability. Just different ways of looking at like the architecture and how people use it throughout the day, throughout the year, how people get to the area, just to assess the existing conditions. But I think we're all pretty familiar with that. But to get into kind of the vision that I came up with, and again, this is just my thought process. It's not a concrete proposal. It's not something before the city council. It's just something that I envisioned. But I came up with this vision statement of connecting diverse communities in a vibrant gathering place at the forefront of Utah's emerging urbanism. So I wanted to highlight that this is a place of diversity and that it is and it should be a place where people gather, and that is an aspect of urbanism and a really unique neighborhood. So I came up with 5 design objectives, and when I was trying to think through how 9th and 9th could evolve over time. So first was to close 9th South to cars, and that's a pretty bold one, but I think it could have a lot of benefits for the area. That's something that happens during the annual street festival. And I'll get into more of the details of what that might look like in just a minute. And then I wanted to connect the site more thoroughly with the neighborhood by activating the alleys. There are 3 alleys that lead to 9th and 9th. in the area. And I think they're kind of an untapped resource that could really add a lot to the area. And then redevelop some of the parking lots. There aren't a lot, but there's some small ones in that area that could be redeveloped to kind of a mixed use setting. And then providing more community gathering space is a fourth one. And fifth is making it a little more inviting throughout the year, especially in the winter, because there is a bit of a drop off in activity, as you would expect. But I think there are ways that could get around that and continue to make it a vibrant place throughout the year. So this just shows an approximation of the existing streetscape. There's a small island in the median, and fairly large sidewalks, some outdoor dining, and then a planting strip with some trees and grass on the side there. And then kind of my vision for what the streetscape could look like if it were close to cars would be something like this, where you have the lanes converted to bus and bike only traffic, adding some trees in the middle and the sides, potentially some space for a food truck, you could throw in some parklets, other gathering space, and then wider sidewalks to allow people to walk along more of the right of way, as well as outdoor dining. And that obviously would vary with business that's adjacent to the street in any particular location. But this is just kind of an idea of what the street could look like, because the right of way is really wide, as most of our streets are in Salt Lake. And so there's a lot of potential. And that's something that the city's transportation department has been taking advantage of as they do street reconstructions, including on 9th South. But this is just kind of taking that a little bit further. Looking at the circulation and parking situation, those yellow lines are the alleys that go through either to Belmont or to 8th South. And then there are some surrounding parking lots that could be utilized because this would be require taking away the on-street parking on 9th South. There's one that belongs, I believe, to Roland Hall. There's the Smith's parking lot, and then the one at the vet clinic. And I think there's definitely potential for those to be utilized for customers and night visitors to have access to the area. And that's something I'll get into in just a minute as well. So as I said, the shared parking is an option. It's been done in a lot of places. One example is in Monrovia, which is near LA in California, where businesses come to an agreement to share parking lots, especially if with uses that have different peak or usage times, like Roland Hall's and probably going to be needing the parking lot in the evening. I've never seen the parking lot at Smith's full. So I think there's definitely potential to use those areas if the parking on 9th South were to go away. And then just kind of bringing it all together, this is just a very conceptual high-level site plan with those bus and bike lanes in the middle, and a lot of green space with some trees planted, and then sidewalk dining on the sides there. That could include some parklets and food trucks. There's a lot of flexibility that could come in there. And then the alleys feeding into that on those three sides. And then I also envisioned, like I said, redeveloping some properties. That's just an idea. It may be a tough lift to do that with the space, and it would probably require some rezoning and variances and that kind of thing. And I didn't really get into that at this level, but just as an idea of if there were to be some redevelopment at 9th and 9th, those would probably be the places to do it. So this is the overarching concept here. And then getting into the alleys, I think those are some, have a lot of potential to make them inviting with art, with planters, lighting, and those go through into the neighborhoods. And obviously, you probably wouldn't have anything hanging over them when there are houses on either side, but definitely you could have art or benches and planters. And the city is kind of already pursuing this through the Funding Our Future bond, doing cement work in alleys. So I think this could be a good path forward. Just some examples from other places where they've refurbished alleys. You could even have dining on the side. This example from Maryland shows, or just some art and some lighting, like in South Carolina on the left. And then I also just suggested that I think some restaurants may do this already at night to night, but with COVID, a lot of restaurants turned to lamps and other things to allow people to eat outside and use the space that way. So I think that's definitely a practice that could really help enliven the space in the wintertime, and improve the sociability, the activity of night to night throughout the year. And I think, as always, providing shade in the summer is a good thing. There are quite a few umbrellas and trees at night to night, but anytime we can add that, I think is helpful, just to make it inviting for people. And so that's not a deterrent. So there are some challenges with some of these ideas, parking, especially if there were to be some new developments. But I think that shared parking could be a solution, and just encouraging people to be active and to use a space as pedestrians and cyclists has a lot of benefits. Fundings would require quite a bit of funding to make it happen with a street reconstruction, and just the logistics of closing nights out the cars if it were to be a more permanent thing. And then, there are concerns in the city about gentrification. I know that the city is working on that issue. But anytime you are adding amenities and investments to an area, you do run that risk in an area, especially if it's already seeing a lot of price increases. So that's something that has to be balanced with the benefits. But those benefits, I think, would be that it would become even more walkable, that pedestrian safety would be improved on 9 South, that there could be potentially more housing opportunities in a very desirable neighborhood with those mixed use sites. This would create a lot more gathering and social space on the streets for people to gather in a variety of uses. And it would strengthen connections with the neighborhood and kind of draw people in with those alleys being activated and rejuvenated. And then just an example of, something similar is the Open Streets program in downtown on Main Street that's been very successful. A lot of the businesses have seen increased revenue from that program, as thousands of people have come down there to enjoy the evenings. And obviously, that's not a permanent closure, but I think it shows that these kinds of changes can be very positive for commercial areas and really do draw people in from far away. So I think there's definitely some precedent here for doing this kind of thing. And that's what I have for you tonight. I'm happy to answer questions if we have time. And that's my email if you would like to get in touch. And yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Anders. That was very impressive. I'm glad I'm not in any of your classes, because my kind of project would definitely not meet what you did for yours. I would basically do a diorama out of a shoebox, and yours is a lot better. So thanks for taking the time to, first of all, do this project and come to our meeting and present it. It's interesting because in ELPCO, I know that a lot of people don't like change. They want to keep things the way they are, right? And there's resistance to that. And it's projects like yours that get us to think a little bit about what could be, thinking about what other cities have done, and just kind of reduce that kind of concrete mindset that we have that everything's got to stay the same and not move is really helpful. So thank you for taking that time. Are there any questions from our audience for Anders about his project, about some of the proposals? You guys can unmute and give it a whirl. We are not locked down anymore.
This is Jonathan. I just want to say that is really, really amazing proposal. Having lived in other cities in California, I mean, I love it, and I love kind of seeing the outside of the box thinking, and definitely the redevelopment, especially as 9th and 9th gets redeveloped and a lot more commercial and housing comes in the area. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments about Andrew's presentation? There's a lot of stuff going on in the chat, very supportive. I'm curious about how you focus on the alleys, actually. When I think of alleys, I think of them running like really long behind people's houses, with garages on them, kind of in the neighborhoods. Never really thought about the alleys in 9th and 9th. But you kind of put that on our radar because, we walk by them and probably ignore them, but there's a lot that can be done there. Can you tell us a little about why you think the alleys are kind of an untapped resource there?
Yeah, I think, it just seemed kind of intuitive that they are potential avenues for people to use to access the site. And I think people kind of enjoy those more enclosed areas if they have those amenities like art or benches. If there's nothing there, then people don't really maybe feel comfortable using them. But I think that they do have that potential. And, there may be some issues with, like you said, garages and, being right by people's backyards. So that's something to think about. But I think at least where they come up right behind the businesses, where they're just used for parking or deliveries or, dumpsters or whatever, I think, especially in those areas, there's definitely potential, and like the mural that went in, I forget the exact business, it's by like the Warby Parker and right there, so that, things are already happening in those alleys. So I think, that there's interest in that. And I think just taking that a step further could really add something and just improve the connections with the neighborhood.
Thanks for that explanation. One other question I had was, is there any examples around Salt Lake City that you're aware of that, a little closer to home than South Carolina or LA that people could take a look at and kind of see what this could become, like Gallivan Center, or you mentioned Main Street? Are there any other areas that you see as being, good places to emulate?
Yeah, I think a lot of people use like the Ninth as an example of what to emulate, it shows just how strong it is. But I think the one that came to mind was Main Street, just because it involved closing the street and making pedestrian. But I know that like Park City Main Street is very popular in kind of a similar commercial area. That's obviously more touristy, but I think that's something that has really good design qualities and it draws a lot of people in. So that's something to look at. So that's probably one I would suggest.
Looks like Cindy Cromer has her hand raised. Cindy, you can go ahead and unmute if you'd like to, or do you want to, you can type in your question as well.
I did type in the question, but I don't know whether Anders saw it. So I wondered, Anders, if you came across the small area plan for the 9th and 9th Business District in your efforts. It was done about 30 years ago by Landmark Design.
Okay, yeah, I haven't looked at that in detail, but I think, yeah, that is a good starting point to look at.
So I will, since you've provided your email, I'll flip that to you, but it has an interesting funding history. It was jointly funded by the Community Council, the larger Community Council, East Central, Salt Lake City, and Smith's. And it was the expansion of Smith's that really drove the study. And one of your sites, the old loading dock for Smith's, is a really obvious redevelopment opportunity on 900 South. So I'll flip that to you. It's not easy to find on the city's website.
Okay.
And
no, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the mixed use right behind Smith's, I think, yeah, you're right. That is owned by Smith's. So thank you.
Thanks, Cindy, for helping us out with sort of the legacy issues that sometimes this has been done before and we just forget about it. So it's good to dig into the archives.
Yeah, ancient history.
Let's see, Darren, Councilmember Mano put something in the chat about this could be a good opportunity for a CIP or a capital improvement project grant. Those are the hefty grants, the big ones, over $50,000, I think up to 500. But that could be a way to jumpstart some of these ideas and get them in. I mean, we know that the intersection is going to be redesigned in the next year or year and a half. And that could be an opportunity to not just kind of recreate it, but maybe do something a little bit above and beyond. We all love 9th and 9th. We could, and everybody thinks it's the best. Maybe we can make it better. So I think that's something to consider. Let me put your full presentation. You gave us only a truncated version, Anders, because you did so much more in your actual assignment. So I'll put that full PDF in the chat that people can take a look at. It's quite interesting to read. And it makes you feel good about 9th and 9th and also shows you places that we can improve. So that's kind of the best part, right? That it stretches you a bit. So cool. Any further questions for Anders? Well, thank you very much for coming today. Hopefully you'll get some extra credit. or you might have gotten yourself a job with Salt Lake City. Who knows? But let's thank Anders, and let's move on to our second of our three presentations about data in the past, present, and future of ELPCO in our neighborhood here. And we have another student from the University of Utah who has joined us, Megan Jensen, who has a presentation about a project that encompasses the whole city, but actually spotlights lots of different neighborhoods along the way. So Megan, I think you're a co-host, but you would like me to put the presentation up, is that right?
That would be great if you could.
I will do that. Give me a second. And then you can just tell me when you want me to flip the slides.
Okay.
All right, can you see that?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Megan, and I'm a student in urban planning at the University of Utah. And the university is working on a project in Salt Lake City called the Gentrification Assessment and Displacement Mitigation Plan, or we're calling it Thriving in Place for short. Today, I'll just take 5 minutes to provide a very brief overview of the team and work that students have done so far. And I'll also invite you to fill out a couple of surveys and also check out the official website for the project. And you can switch to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so there's 3 groups working together on this project. The University of Utah is the local partner. Baird and Driscoll Community Planning is the project management and planning lead. Their business is a national leader in affordable housing policy development with a deep commitment to ensuring that those who are affected by policy decisions are involved in shaping them. And then lastly, UC Berkeley's Urban Displacement Project is the research lead, and they're the national leader in analyzing and understanding the forces that drive displacement and gentrification. So that's kind of the team that's working on this project. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so last semester, planning students at the University of Utah interviewed 420 residents and collected people's stories on neighborhood change and their hopes for the future. They also mapped community assets that should be preserved. And you can see their work in a link that I will put in the chat really quick. So that's a link to the website to see all of their information for each of the neighborhoods. And if you could go to the next slide. Thanks. So these are some of the main desires for the neighborhood of East Liberty Park that some of the residents expressed in the surveys that were done by previous students last semester. So some of the main points are that many people were concerned about maintaining and improving walkability, maintaining the neighborhood's character as new development happens. And with new development, there's a desire to make sure that increased traffic is planned for and that green space is maintained. And of course, there's a desire for housing affordability to be addressed. And so you can look at the story map of your neighborhood in another link that I'll just throw in the chat. There we go. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So this is the Thriving in Place project official website that you can go to. This is what the front page looks like. I'll put the link to this in the chat. Sorry, there's a lot of links, but. So there's a link to the official website. There's also, that just has been released, an official survey. This is what we're using to get feedback from citizens and engage with the community. And it's the best way to share your thoughts and contribute to the project. And on the website, you can also subscribe for updates about events coming up. Next slide. Yeah, so that was just a short presentation, and the purpose of this project is just to survey what the priorities should be when planning for gentrification and mostly to figure out the concerns of the citizens and just engage with the community. Ultimately, the city will decide how to use the findings of this project and implement anything into planning or policy. So yeah, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions or comments, I can try and answer them, but I'm also happy to take them back to the group and then get back to you. So.
Great, thank you, Megan. One quick question to start off with. Did you actually do the interviews in one of the neighborhoods as part of this project?
I personally didn't. These were done by students last semester.
It looks like we have a question from Cindy Cromer. Cindy?
I have to remember to unmute. So Megan, thank you for doing this tonight and for your involvement. I'd like to hear more about what you are doing besides going around to community councils and meeting on Zoom.
Yeah, so I can speak to what my class is doing this semester. So we are all going to the different community councils in the city. We're doing other types of community outreach to try and get the word out about the project. Such as posters and going to public spaces and talking with different stakeholders. We're also going to be out on the streets doing the surveys. I think the main goal is to get the word out and try and have as many people as possible fill out the surveys. This is what we really would like to get done. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a question. Rebecca, do you want to ask it?
Oh, sure. Megan, I was looking at, thank you so much for this information. It's such an amazing project that you're doing and lots of data that you're collecting. I was just looking at some of the neighborhoods and I thought it was so interesting that you were able to get kind of demographic data for each area. I've never seen that kind of data available. And so I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that data was collected or maybe where it's coming from.
Yeah, that's something I'd have to take back to the class. That's something I didn't work on myself, so I don't know the answer. Let me just take that down and I'll be able to get the answer for you and get back to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
I totally agree, Becca. We're used to seeing data for like cities and counties and states, but to see like Ballpark or Yalecrest, places like that, my guess is they use census tract data from the census to really zero in on, trying to match the neighborhood boundaries as best they can. So, but thank you for checking on that, Megan, because that kind of data makes some of us get really excited. So any other questions for Megan about the Thriving in Place project?
I was just going to add, I'm also involved in this through one of my classes, and I think the data did come from the census at the census tract level, which is pretty small. So there's a lot you can learn from that data. So it's exciting to see it.
Megan and Anders, what is the best way that I or we as the community can help to spread the word about the survey and ask as many people to take that, or is there any other specifics that would be helpful to the project at this time?
I don't know. I'm sure my professor would love to get in on that. So I'll definitely talk to her about that. Anders, do you have any ideas?
I think right now the survey is the most important thing that we're trying to kind of push and to get feedback, and we're trying to make it representative of the entire city. So we'll be going out to each community council area and trying to get people, out in the community to take it. And then we'll be having an event in April where we'll kind of present the results of what we've been working on, at least in the class that I'm in. And I think people who are interested could attend that event as well.
Other questions for Anders or Megan about this really cool project?
Jason, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. This is Cindy again. the survey just was released, just posted on the website less than a week ago. So this is breaking news from Anders and Megan. It's really great that they are here. I'm going to take the survey myself, and then I'm going to send out one of those noxious email blasts to my long-suffering friends that says, do this. The city has almost no data on the subject, so fill it out. And if I ever get to see you again, I'm going to ask you whether you did it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to blast it out under BCC and tell them about my experience and how long it took to fill it out, and pretty much come close to begging them to do it, because it's really sad how little the city knows about displacement, rent rates, vacancy rates, especially if you know people who are renters. Make sure that they get it.
Yeah, we're going to be doing social media outreach as well, and trying to get a hold of different people to put it on their social medias. So that's another good way to get involved if you'd like.
Megan, I'm just going to put it on my social media right now, but is it there's the story map link and then there's a survey link? Are those separate? Can you
Yes.
help me understand the difference between those two things, because they both seem like surveys that you can take online, right?
Yeah, let me just.
And what's the difference between those two things, and is one more important than the other?
So the story map link is going to take you to the information that students did last semester. This was just them going out to the neighborhoods and interviewing, and then compiling what they got from the information they got from interviewing people. The survey link should just take you to, like, I think it's a Google survey or something like that. It should just take you straight to that, and that's where you just put in your answers and submit it. Let me just check really quick, and I'll specify which one's the survey. Yeah, so this one, I'll just put it in the chat again. That's the one that you just can put into your browser, and it'll take you straight to where you can fill out the survey and submit it.
Great, thanks for that clarification. And we'll definitely blast this out on the ELPCO e-newsletter as well. But you came to the right place. If you got Cindy Cromer sending it out to all of her folks, then you're going to get some good responses from some people who care about these issues. And I totally agree that catching folks that are recently moved into Utah or Salt Lake City or renting, got to make sure we have a complete demographic kind of capture on this. So thank you, Megan. Thank you, Anders, for also adding in. I wanted to just follow up a little bit before we get to our third and final exciting data presentation, just about the census. It kind of underlies a lot of what we've been talking about today, from the redistricting that Councilmember Mano mentioned in terms of District 4 and 5 having different kind of population trends, to what we're going to talk about in a little bit with Salt Lake City School District enrollment. And that is that this data controls a lot about what goes on in our city and our representation. And just a couple interesting facts that I thought would be interesting to know, that Salt Lake City right now is the biggest that it's ever been. When the census in 2020 came out, it's just shy of 200,000 people. It's never been that big, and it's growing. And that's something I think that makes our city actually kind of exciting and vibrant, and has a lot of good carryover to us. Utah, of course, is also bigger than it's ever been before. But in 10 years, it's going to be 4 million people. And by 2060, Utah is going to be 5.5 million people, according to the latest sort of predictions. We're at about 3 something now, a little bit over 3. So we're almost going to be doubling in the next 40 years. Salt Lake County, by that time, is going to be 1.7 million people, according to those predictions. And what's going to be interesting is that instead of like natural increases, people having more babies, the actual population trends are going to be driven by in-migration, people moving here for jobs, people moving here for the lifestyle, for the environment, things like that. So that's a big difference. At the same time, our population is going to get a lot older, and people are going to be having fewer kids. Our household size is going to be going down quite a bit. And one other aspect that I think is interesting is that the changes within Salt Lake City are very distinct, in that District 4 downtown has huge population gains. They gained 6,000 people in the past 10 years, whereas District 5, where we live, only gained about 1,000. And a lot of those people moving in to District 4 and moving into some of the other areas of Salt Lake City, it's going to have a profound impact on our school district, which is where my segue, that was pretty smooth, wasn't it? Our segue to our third presentation with Connor Sanders from the Salt Lake Tribune, the education reporter. Connor, thanks for being here and kind of rounding out our trifecta of data reports with, I think, something people are going to be really interested in, because this affects day to day, where you go to school, whether your school, you know, how many kids are there, things like that. So you've been covering this issue. And I do want to say that we're going to have someone from the Salt Lake School District come on next month to be able to talk a little bit more about this. Mohammed Bayed was going to come today, but he had a school event that he had to attend. But we will have someone from the school district next month be able to come and give us an update, because things are happening, Connor, right? Like there's meetings, there's plans, there's data. It's all in play. Can you tell us what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely happy to walk you through this and have this opportunity to. It's fun to talk about my reporting and not always just be typing away at my computer. So thank you for this chance. Principally, I just want to. I think that's a great point you make about using data. As of course, my computer doesn't want to let me share screen right now. So at the start of this year, Salt Lake City School District heard a presentation from Rick Brammer, who is a data analyst and demographer based out of Arizona with this company, Applied Economics. And he made a presentation to Salt Lake City School District, basically outlining just a model for what the next 10 years will look like in the district. And a big part of that is what Jason was talking about. There's going to be a lot of population growth in the district, but in terms of actual numbers in Salt Lake City schools, they're going to go down in a pretty significant way. So if you can scroll down to that fall K through 12 enrollment slide, it's the very next one. Yes, so you see there through 2014-15, numbers were pretty consistently hanging around that 22,000, 22,500 range in Salt Lake City School District. And in 2014-15, in 2015-16, you started to see a bit of a decline in the district. I think, and this, from what we've seen in our reporting, is, and what Rick Brammer talked about, is a lot to do with the gentrification of Salt Lake City. A lot of multifamily houses or housing units are being built, which make it difficult they're difficult to afford for young families. And many of the families that do move into those, they don't have the right amenities, or that would consider moving into those, don't have the right amenities close by to have kids. So that is something that's affecting it. And then you see in between the 2019-20 academic year to 2020-21, there's a pretty significant drop. And that's something that the school district is trying to address and to try and accommodate. And this is something that's been on the board's radar for a while, right? They've seen that enrollment has been declining, and as enrollment falls, that means that puts SLC school district in kind of a difficult position where they have to, make decisions on, to cut staffing and eventually even considering having to close schools. So on that next slide, you see something really interesting that stuck out to me is that those numbers are falling pretty much across the board, but actually in high schools, we've actually seen an increase of students in Salt Lake City School District. So that green line is middle school, the blue line, K through 2, obviously red being 3rd through 5th. All those areas are declining as fewer and fewer students move in. But high schools have still maintained kind of the level that they're at. And that will put additional stress as the district considers how to move forward on elementary and middle schools. So as we'll keep moving through this, there's a lot of students that come outside of Salt Lake City School District to Salt Lake City schools. There's some programs in place that are kind of magnet programs that you can rely on to move that come in from outside of the district. And that's something that the district is considering still, trying to entice people from outside of the district to come. And to address that question in the chat, the reason that there was that significant dip, I think from the reporting that I've done, it points to some of that being the online learning, that people wanted to try something different. And I think that a lot of schools in Utah didn't see an increase in enrollment this year because people are considering different enrollment options. You can take school online. A lot of people are moving to private schools as well. So that definitely is a part of it. And I think that moving to online learning is, from what I've seen in my reporting, it also contributes to that. So scrolling down to that enrollment density, I think this is really interesting. You see up on the east side of that graph, a lot of blue, not a very densely populated area in terms of students right now. And you can see in the next one as well that the change in enrollment from that initial drop off to right before the pandemic wasn't really felt on the east side. School numbers actually increased in some areas and kind of maintained the level they were at in others. And the rest of the city, obviously, on the west side, it's been a decrease. But on the next slide as well, we see the big difference between that 5-year period, 2014 to 2019, to now 2019, 20 to 2021, 22, which is when the pandemic started. And they made that transition to online schooling for all of last year. It was a pretty big drop in enrollment pretty much throughout the district, especially on the west side, and on the east side as well. Not as bad as what, or as significant as what we saw on the west side. So we'll keep scrolling here, Jason, thank you. This is the census data that they were looking at. And I think the next one has a little bit more. This is something that's interesting, is, as Jason mentioned, the Salt Lake City is booming. There's tons of people moving here, a lot of attractive, especially for young people. But that middle area you see there on your screen, that's very densely red, a lot of people are moving into the downtown area. Rick Brammer, who did this presentation, he made a survey and surveyed some people in this downtown area that have moved into multifamily housing. A lot of multifamily housing units are being built here, which is why we see that big influx of people. And he surveyed all those buildings. I think there are something like 4,000 people that were, or 4,000 units that had been built in that area, and found that only 69 students had moved into that area in K through 12 schools in those new housing units. So these housing units are attracting a lot of people, but not a lot of school age kids. And if they are attracting school age kids, they're often high schoolers. They're kind of families that are already a little bit further along in building their family, have older kids that can afford to move into these more expensive, downtown apartments. So that's kind of why they see that the model projects that number will kind of stay where it is. Yes, and so this is a problem that all of Utah is experiencing with birth rate trends. The birth rate has been going down, and it's at a lower level than we've seen in a long time here, as that has been dipping. So it's not just a Salt Lake City issue that the birth rate is going down. There's just less kids to put in schools, but this gentrification problem, or just people moving in without kids, is something that is kind of unique to Salt Lake City, especially downtown. Keep moving through here. So this is that same thing that I was talking about. A lot of people are moving here since 2010, but a lot of them either aren't going to Salt Lake City schools, or are like using alternative providers like private schools or online. But as you see on the Upper East Bench, there's movement of young people in some areas, and for the most part, it's kind of staying where it's at. So we can scroll through this alternative providers developments. We can keep moving through that. This is that thing I was referencing. 4,600 units were built, and of these units he surveyed, only 69 kids were school aged. So we'll keep moving here. That's just the rail line system, and this is the projections that he's starting to make. So I think the next one talks about school population. So you see that drop off from 2014, 2015, 16. We're at 22,800 kids, and now 6 years later, have dipped below 20,000, and those numbers will continue to fall according to these projections down below 17,000 10 years from now. Same contributing factors to that as well. Yeah, and that's just enrollment population ratio. So you see that green, there's like more kids here, but not as high of an actual level of enrollment that they actually enroll in SLC schools. So this is the percentage changes in specific grades or specific groups of schools, different levels. We see pretty big drops, especially in elementary and middle schools over this 10-year projection that he made. And then the next one we see, this is a good thing to kind of keep track of, is this highlights all the schools and their enrollment in that kind of those 3 windows that Brammer talked about, 2014 to 2019. You see a lot of schools that had a decrease in enrollment, and the projections are pretty much similar across the board. There's a couple that stick out, like Meadowlark has seen already a pretty significant drop off and may continue to see that.
Just Connor, so the school districts, the elementary schools in our area would be Emerson, Hawthorne, Uinta, and Whittier. Those tend to be the schools that most of the residents here attend. Clayton Middle School, and then East High School. So folks want to take a look there at those schools.
Yes. So like I said, I think the reporting shows that high schools and middle schools might not be as affected as elementary schools. And one thing that the board is talking about and is starting to consider is kind of what to do with these enrollment numbers that are dropping. So I'm going to put this article in the chat. You can pull it up as well, please. That just talks about what the school board is considering. Essentially, the way that staffing works in the school district is there's an allocation of full-time positions for every certain amount of students. I think for kindergartners, it's only 50, there's 50 students per FTE or full-time enrollment. And there need to drop based on the way that enrollment has changed. There are 76.5 full-time educator positions that will need to be shaved based on the enrollment numbers that they've had. And the school board at this point has moved to kind of mitigate that big cut just because it might be kind of a shock to the system. That's what the superintendent said. And they're going to cut 42 FTE or full-time positions. And that primarily will be felt in elementary and middle schools, and specifically the school district wants to mitigate that just to maintain enough teachers at each school to have one per grade level and just have like the basic education program. And this, it's important to note that Salt Lake City is not going to lay off people to get to this level. With this projection that they've made, they're planning on retirements and not renewing one-year contracts and other resignations to kind of cover that position. They just won't hire as many teachers as they would during a typical year. So the board, as they consider the closure process, there is a written outlined procedure that the district will have to follow. And I'm going to put that here in the chat as well. And that kind of talks about some of the factors that the superintendent and the board will consider. Essentially, in basic terms, the superintendent will have to present a study list to the board outlining enrollment data, like programs that those schools offer, and some other logistical things, as well as some of the provisions that have been made at these schools as the district kind of talks about what its next steps are. At this point, the district hasn't explicitly said we're going to be closing schools, but that's something that some of the board members that have been on the board for the longest have said is something that they're going to have to confront at some point. And some board members express that they don't want to kick this down the road or put the next person that takes their seat in a situation where they'll have to make this decision. So that's something that the board is going to look at. And that study list has to be presented by the end of this month, by the end of February. And then if the district does decide that that's something that they want to take on this year, they're reporting that it's a 2-year process. Essentially, there's some public comment and a lot of review of what schools might be candidates for that. And by the 2023-24 school year, if that's what if they do decide to do that, that's when you would start to see actually schools closing. And it's interesting to note too that this demographic data, it's expensive for schools to have to hire more people than their kind of allotment will give them. So that's something that they'll have to consider as they move forward. I wanted to bring this list up. This is just a little spreadsheet I made looking at some of the data. I hope that'll let you pull that up and not ask for sharing permissions there. Jason, if you can share that. This is just kind of a rough.
It's asking for permission.
Dang, okay. Well, shoot.
Might be able to respond if it sent a request to you.
Okay. Let me approve that request quickly here. But this is just a rough kind of look at how those numbers have changed and where specifically that change has taken place. Two of the ones that have jumped out to me have been Indian Hills and Beacon Heights, who have both lost more than 100 kids over the last, going back to 2017 to now. Let me try this. Okay. Try and share that, or share that again here. Should have permission now, hopefully.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, great. So this is, like I said, just a kind of a rough look at, based on some of the school enrollment data that the school district is using. Super sure on which ones are ELPCO, but these are just some of the schools on the east side. And you see from 2017 to that column where there's some red and green is before the pandemic, some schools that were starting to lose kids. And then I've made some projections for what that'll look like in the future. And that's something that the school district will consider. So the ones that jumped out to me were they have lost kids is Beacon Heights and Indian Hills. And there's a lot that the district will consider as they kind of take their next steps. But that's kind of the quick and dirty version of it that the district is considering and starting to talk about how to address this fall in enrollment and what that will mean for FTE, for school employees, and also for if which schools will stay open and how that process will unfold. So that's kind of the overview of it, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
Thank you, Connor, for walking us through the pretty complex subject and maybe not a lot of folks have been aware of. School boards tend to stay out of the news until things get a little bit heavy, and then they're all over the news. But this is definitely an issue that we're going to be following. Any questions for Connor about his reporting, about his predictions, about what he's seen? Nothing coming through in the chat. I appreciate all the resources. It's neat to see sort of how you work as well from your spreadsheet. One thing that I thought was interesting is you kind of draw the connection between housing and school enrollment. You know, that these multifamily apartment complexes are going up, like they're too expensive for people with kids. And so that is actually causing some of this decline in enrollment. You know, maybe it's not that there's not other options for those families as well. If they don't want to live in a multifamily, they want to live in a single family home. There's not enough of those in Salt Lake City anymore. So it's interesting to see how housing and education can be connected. Are there any other interesting connections that you came up with or that you saw, like about the economy, about COVID, things like that, that could be impacting what's going on right now?
Yeah, I think from Rick Brammer's presentation, all of those things are contributing. Everything is coming together in kind of this big soup, and it seems kind of counterintuitive that as population numbers are booming in Salt Lake City, that its schools would be struggling to kind of match that with enrollment. I think the reporting shows that the biggest connection is in housing. I think like that survey that he conducted is really eye-opening. Only 70 students were in these 4,600 new units that have been created. So those things are all connected. Certainly, I think COVID has had effect. COVID has sent a lot of students to private schools or to just completely, like alternatives, not even in public education, excuse me. So I think a lot of those things contribute. Has there been talk? I see a question in the chat. Has there been talk about what will happen if they aren't able to fill those 40+ positions with retiring teachers? Will they target special classes such as PE, music, computers, etc.? I don't have a great answer to that question. The school district is very adamant that they're not going to lay anybody off this year. With this cut to 42, they're going to fill that with retiring teachers and not renewing one-year contracts. That's something I'll look into, though. That's a good question. And I also wanted to ask people here, it's kind of rare that a journalist just like gets a group of people that he can ask, like, what do you want to know? Are there things that you want me to look into? Are there experiences that you want to share with me? I'm going to put my email in the chat now, or at any point in the future. Please reach out to me with those kinds of things. And I would be happy to talk with you.
Thanks for doing that, Connor. Question from Darren.
Jason, I'll just add to your comment about family-sized housing and affordable housing is that's something that we, as in our role as the RDA board, have been becoming more acutely aware of and more focused on. It's always been, for the last several years, it's been in our housing. We have like a list of housing funding goals, but it's a difficult list because there's like 20 or 30 goals, and projects can apply for funding, and they're not going to hit all of those. And the family-sized affordable housing has been one that we just have not seen very much of because it's so much more expensive, both land value wise and just the cost of construction for a 3 or even 4 bedroom apartment is so high. So I think the way that I'd like to see us move is to say, like we've done with our high opportunity zone housing dollars. We've said, here's the say $10 million that we have for housing this year, but 5 of it or 4 of it can only be used in high opportunity zones. I think it's probably time that we consider doing that for family-sized housing and say, of the 10 million, and I'm just making a number up, but of the 10 million we have this year for affordable housing, 4 million of it can only be used for projects that have a certain percentage of family-sized units. Because it's not just, I think there is something to be said for families want a yard for their kids and their dog. And unfortunately in Salt Lake City right now, there's just single family houses are just too expensive for most young families. So, but I think there are families that would live in an apartment building. They just don't exist. And if they do exist, they're as expensive as that single family house. So that's one thing that we're trying to do. And then looking at affordable single family home ownership, we're starting on the west side with the West Side Community Land Trust, trying to find a way that the city can sort of help young families purchase their first home and then keep that as an affordable unit. So it's something that's been incredibly hard to get development to do, just because for external factors it's so expensive. So that's something that we're looking at. But you're right on point with that, the fact that even with all the housing that's been built, it just hasn't hit the mark for young families.
Cool. Judy, thanks, Darren. Judy, you got a question? You're muted, Judy.
Yeah, I realized that. 2 things. One is, when I ask developers, when they come to us with a huge apartment building, where are the 3-bedroom units? And they just shake their head and they say there is no demand. So there's that. Then the other piece is, when I say, how much does it cost to build a unit of apartments? And the answer right now is between $200,000 and $300,000. So Darren's $40 million is going to build like 20 units. It's crazy. It's like we're in this spiral. We don't know how to get out of it.
We try and leverage those dollars so that we're only paying for a part of the unit, but getting the goals that we want for the community. But yes, you're right. It's a big problem.
So I totally
Michael?
agree that the housing is probably contributing to the enrollment. I mean, it seems like it makes a lot of sense. I moved here from Denver not quite 3 years ago, and everything there, they were taking down a lot of the single families and putting in like 2 townhouses, and you could fit like 3 times the square footage on the same footprint. And then everyone would have a yard. It could be fenced in, it was just kind of like, I think that contributed because we started to see more kids over time. And I don't know, just
That's an
whatever happened.
excellent point, and I think we should chat.
That's kind of like the whole missing middle issue of kind of smaller multifamily housing. So cool. I had a quick question too, Connor. Last time schools were closed in Salt Lake City, which is before my time here, was the early 2000s. It was Lowell Elementary School in the Avenues and Roslyn Heights down across from Highland High. Big issue, lawsuits, crazy school board meetings, parents up in arms, board members voted out. It was pretty tumultuous. Is that where we're headed? Is that, do you see any signs of that happening? Or do you think the board has got some better procedures and kind of a glide plan here to figure this out?
That's a tough question, right? Because even just a few years ago, there was talk about closing Benyon, and there were some big protests and things that showed out to prevent that from happening. I think it's just a really tough situation to be in. Honestly, and from what I understand from the board previously, they've been trying to mitigate this for a little while now. So it's a tough thing to answer. It's important to remember, and this is something I've been very impressed by in reporting on this, is these schools mean a lot to these communities, right? They're central, they're meeting places, and it's really where a lot of communities come together. You see people, at your PTA meetings, and so if you have to move to a new school, that, if the boundaries have to be redrawn, it's a really tough thing. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to kind of follow what the board does, but I think they're in just such a difficult position that it's hard to see it, just like no problems, everything will just smoothly fly off into the sunset, right? It's just a big thing to have to kind of figure out.
Well, thanks for that nuanced answer there. And it's so ironic to see all these cranes on the skyline and all these buildings going up, and yet we're talking about, changing school boundaries and potentially closing schools. So it's just a very strange dynamic. One other quick thing I wanted to ask about was, a lot of people, I think in the past had thought that, enrollment is declining on the east side of Salt Lake City. But the latest numbers that you were showing us shows that on the west side as well, there's been actually years of declining enrollment. Do you see this now as kind of a district-wide issue, not just sort of east and west and north and south?
Yeah, that's something that Rick Brammer talked about. Is this was an east side problem, and now it's just a district-wide thing. And I think that the pandemic had a huge contributor to that, because all the schools had to deal with these same kinds of changes. So I think that the answer, from what I've seen in the reporting, is yes. This is a district-wide thing that they'll have to deal with, and it'll affect certain schools certainly more than others. But it's a whole district-wide problem. I think I saw somebody else with their hand up.
Oh, that was me, Connor.
Okay.
It's Cindy again. I had the misfortune to get appointed to the school closure committee in 2002. It was the worst assignment of my entire life as a volunteer. It was horrid, and I will I'll be happy to talk with you more about that. But just to kind of pique the interest of the people in ELPCO, the first school that was protected in the process was Indian Hills. That was the very first school that the group decided could not possibly be closed because, of course, children could not cross Foothill Boulevard even though other children were crossing 400 South.
Is the
It was
internet
very interesting.
The TV in the front room went out.
So anyway, it was, it was a very difficult assignment, and Jason did a fabulous job of summarizing the chaos and angst. It was miserable. But I'll talk to you some more about that.
It sounds like no fun. It sounds kind of miserable. One thing that's just been kind of floating around the back of my mind, and this is not something that the district has discussed. This is just something I know that there's also, the district has talked about and needs to update their office building to be earthquake safe. They've made a really amazing effort to make every school in the every school in the district earthquake safe. And if they did arrive at a point where they had to close a school, there's also a potential they've already earthquake saved that building. There's also a chance that, they could repurpose that building as an office or do something else with it. But that's been something that I've been kind of thinking about.
I did want to put one more thing in here. I did get a message from Mohammed Bayed, who's the District 5 or Precinct 5 member of the Salt Lake City School Board. He was going to try to be here tonight, as I mentioned, but he had a school event. He just wanted me to read this, which is, it is correct that our student population is decreasing. However, this is not the right time to bring this to the table. I presume he's talking about school closures and other issues. Student, teachers, and staff and families are struggling emotionally and physically due to COVID. Also, families are paying more at the pumps, grocery stores. So adding this to the basket of these challenges is not just right, it is inconsiderate. So he's not denying the declining enrollment, he says, but bringing this up now is actually denying the challenges that families are dealing with. So that was from Mohammed Bayed, the Precinct 5 member for Salt Lake City. We'll have someone from the district at our March 24th meeting to kind of tell us a little bit more. And actually, we'll know more at the March 1st meeting. Is that right, Connor? That's when we'll get this first report from the superintendent.
Yeah, so that I'm not sure if how much of this process will be public, and if we have to request those documents, we'll certainly be looking into that. But that's something that should be coming up at the next meeting.
Thanks. And we'll watch for your reporting in the Salt Lake Tribune, which I hope people subscribe. It's important to keep our hometown newspapers going as well as our schools. So if you don't subscribe, consider it. It's great. Get it on Wednesdays and Saturdays now. So I appreciate that extra hit during the week. In the chat, I put up one more thing, which is a 2003 article from City Weekly, going way back. And it actually is a great summary of what happened in the early 2000s with the school closure process that Cindy probably remembers a lot. Cindy, you might not want to read that article. It might bring back some of those unpleasant memories, but read the names in that article. You'll see folks that are very familiar to folks here in East Liberty Park, including Heather Bennett, the former District 5 school board member, longtime school board member here in ELPCO. Thank you, Connor, for coming tonight, giving us your take. This is a really important issue we're going to be following closely because, as you said, schools are important for our community. They really bring people together. I next want to turn things over to Tim Cosgrove from the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office. Tim, thanks for being here. It looks like you are back in the United States and not traveling abroad like last month.
Thank you. I took some time off. I had some vacation time I had to use that was built up from the prior administration. Otherwise, I would lose it. But it's nice to be with you here tonight. Thank you to those of you who stayed on. I appreciate sharing some information. Wow, it's a lot of data, a lot of statistics, a lot of analysis that's been shared tonight. A lot to take in. Honestly, my heart has been, and my thoughts have been with the people of Ukraine today. It's a terrible thing that we have to witness and see. I didn't think I'd see these type of invasions in my lifetime, but we've had a lot of that the last 2 years. So my thoughts and prayers are with them. I wanted to share that. On the data, I'll see if I can complement what's been shared with our students and Connor, and I'll kick it off with an action this week that the mayor kicked off with her blueprint for growing Salt Lake City's healthcare innovation economy. It was really kind of interesting. But Mayor Mendenhall, through the Mayor's Tech Lake City initiative, released a blueprint for Salt Lake City's healthcare economy. And it's been going on, work has been going on for the last 2 years with our Economic Development Department, the Kim Gardner Policy Institute, and a lot of input from individuals and organizations throughout the city, but it's really very interesting. And this will help the city build on the success of healthcare innovation sector, and is really helping to put Salt Lake City on the map in Utah and in the United States, with the focus and opportunity for healthcare innovation for underserved city residents. I will put the link for the blueprint. See if I can get that in on the chat and share that with y'all, and then maybe we can come back and have a presentation that will be provided. Also, I wanted to remind everyone that the request for information that the city has put out for seeking community-driven ideas for fleet block is open until the end of the day tomorrow, or it might be the end of this month, the end of February, but it's coming quick upon us. So the city had issued a request for information in relation to the city-owned fleet block. It's over on the 850 South, 300 West, and it's the community and neighborhood CAN that's exploring the future uses of the property and trying to put those benefits that we want to hear from you in the community. But it's about 8.75 acres. It's nearly the whole entire block. So there's a lot of land space there, a lot of invaluable land space that we can't just create, but we get to recreate and be creative in how it's used. So please make sure that you fill out that survey and put information in there. What else? Oh, my friend over in the police department, Brent Weisenberg, asked me to share with you that Salt Lake City Police Department is preparing to start its community academy March 1st. So this is for people who want to become more acquainted with how police department functions, and the community academy participants will receive training in a large variety of aspects of law enforcement, patrol tactics. Man, I wish Detective Meinzer was on here tonight. Defense tactics, I know firearms and other subjects. The cadets in the community academy will meet many of the police department members and get a feel and an idea for all the responsibilities that they have in providing public safety. So these courses will take place the entire month of March. If you're interested in something like that, and I'll include that link in the chat as well. The beginning of the year, we kicked off, oh shoot, I can't believe we're already almost through February. It's gone fast. But there's many boards and commissions within Salt Lake City. due up at the beginning of the year, many volunteer opportunities. There's 26 boards and commissions with many open seats for Salt Lake City residents. And so if you have a interest or expertise in those areas, I encourage you to please take a look at many of those positions. And if you're available and interested, please apply. Lynn Jacobs has the 1100 East, 900 South survey out. So the reconstruction for 900 South to Logan Avenue, which is about, I think it's 1600 South, Jason, 17. But all the pavements, the gutters, sidewalks, possibilities of changing for street design. I'll put that link in for the survey. So I want to share your ideas and thoughts in there. And then please, the mayor appealed to the public last month and again this month, but for the public to help fill our shelter staff volunteer vacancies. We have job openings and a lot of volunteer opportunities with our homeless resource centers. It's cold outside. We can expand our hours. We can provide more service, get more people off the street if we have volunteers, if we have those job positions, those job services that all of our unsheltered population and our service providers provide. We just can't do it without them. So if you have an opportunity to join in on there, please do.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for giving us an update about all that's going on, and it'd be interesting to see with the mayor's budget also coming out in the next month or two to see, where we're going to put some of the new funding that Salt Lake City has received from the rescue fund dollars. So great. Any questions for Tim about the mayor's office or any of the initiatives he described?
I appreciated Councilmember Mano sharing that legislative update also. The budget, although we the city do our own balanced budget, the mayor and the city council, we're hopeful for some dollars from the state this year. So that will be critical with our services, because the homeless services, we just can't do it all on our own. We carry an awful lot on the city's shoulders to provide those services.
Great. Well, thank you, Tim, for the update. One thing I just wanted to add before we close out our meeting with a quick election is the neighborhood boost grant from ELPCO. Just a couple more days to apply for that. That's up to $2,500 that ELPCO is going to be giving to one or more residents here in ELPCO to revitalize their street, their neighborhood, bring their neighbors together to do something, have an event. We have some great coverage in the Salt Lake Tribune, and appreciate the other city departments and other folks that have been promoting this. The ELPCO Neighborhood Boost Grant, look for the application link on our Facebook page or in the chat. We're giving away free money, folks. I mean, what's better than that, right? This is the first year we're doing it, and we'd love to have more applications and sort of get our neighbors excited about this. So thanks also for all the board members who've been working on this project for a couple months now. Our last news or item for the agenda is to do the voting for the ELPCO board. We had our nominations at our last meeting in January. I'm going to entertain a motion to do a bulk approval for our board members of Jeff Larson for East Emerson, Christina Robb for West of East, Nancy Phillip for 9th and 9th Business Liaison. Would there anybody make a motion to approve these folks to continue their board membership? Have to be a board member.
Yeah. I will move to have them reinstated or continue on.
Great. Yeah, that's my exact Robbie's Rules of Order language, right? Thank you, Jeff. Any second?
Sure, I'll second.
Michael seconds. Great. Okay. Can we have a show of hands for those who want to sustain or keep Christina, Jeff, and Nancy as board members of ELPCO? You can do virtual or fake hands. Okay, appreciate that. We normally do these elections in the fall, but we kind of missed it last September, October, so we're kind of catching up. We will have new elections in the fall of this year. September and October is when we generally do that if we come back after our summer break, and including for co-chair. So I am not sure I'll be continuing on as co-chair. I'm feeling the urge to go do some new things. So that would be an opening that would be coming up. So definitely keep that in mind, folks, as that goes. It's great. The car is an incredible perk. The ELPCO car, it's amazing. Yeah. Wait, did I say that? No, doesn't exist. Any other new business or any other ideas that we want to discuss before we wrap up tonight? I think we're going to have a meeting coming up about xeriscaping. It's spelled with an X. The idea of taking out the greenery in your front yard and putting in things that are much more water resistant or don't need much water. Michael's been working on that. So that's going to be an upcoming meeting topic. I think Salt Lake City might be entertaining some changes to the rules around that. And feel free to send us any ideas that you've got about meeting ideas to elpcoslc@gmail.com. We'll be following the school issue, redistricting issue, and several others going forward, but love to know exactly what residents want us to talk about or bring in speakers about as well. So thank you for posting those notes, Tim, and those links. And if there's no more business, we'll adjourn. I'm going to go put my kids to bed. I still hear them running around upstairs. It sounds like they're about to tear down the house. So hope everyone has a good night. And I think we'll be back in person within a month or two too. So that'll be good. Have a good night all.